Welcome, everyone. I am Harvey Aronson, and this is Ann Klein, and we are the founding co-directors of Dawn Mountain. And welcome, everyone in YouTube land. I feel like a spiritual Ed Sullivan.
The Beatles.
Yeah, we're gonna be doing the equivalent of the Beatles tonight. Okay, so we start with refuge, which orients us to what we hold as ultimate, which guides us and supports us, and ultimately what we realize. And we then continue with our bodhicitta motivation, which is our altruistic concern for others, which is the motivation with which we practice, hoping to establish ourselves in full realization so that we're in a position to establish others in that same state of freedom and spontaneous compassion. Okay. So we will do this, and we'll do the prayers in English 3 times each. And then Ann and I will do an invocation. In 3 real jewels, 3 root bliss-filled ones, channels, winds, bright orbs, this Bodhi mind, essence, nature, moving love mandal, until full Bodhi I seek refuge. In 3 real jewels, 3 root bliss-filled ones, channels, winds, bright orbs, this Bodhi mind, essence, nature, moving love mandal, until full Bodhi I seek refuge. In 3 real jewels, 3 root bliss-filled ones, channels, winds, bright orbs, this Bodhi mind, essence, nature, moving love mandal, until full Bodhi I seek refuge. Oh, like moons in water, sights deceive us. We ever roam bound in cyclic chains. So all may rest in their clear mind sphere. I raise Bodhi through 4 boundless states. Oh, like moons in water, sights deceive us. We ever roam bound in cyclic chains. So all may rest in their clear mind sphere. I raise Bodhi through 4 boundless states. Oh, like moons in water, sights deceive us. We ever roam bound in cyclic chains. So all may rest in their clear mind sphere. I raise Bodhi through 4 boundless states. Kyab dag yawanam dag yer me be, gandin sumden tinchen lama je, ritin jor me tubden jatsola, so wadep so nyamlen tarchin show. Tonight the meditation is going to have 3 distinct phases. There'll be 3 specific practices. And the first is, and they will be explained afterwards as to what their value is. First will be the body scan. And here, what we're really doing is becoming mindful in a non-judgmental manner of what is going on in our body, in an accepting, even, spacious manner, with curiosity. But we're bringing attention to our experience in ways that often in our culture we don't necessarily spend much time doing, and that is sensing our own body. So you can start with your left foot, with your sole on the ground, and sense the contact that you have with the ground. Sense of contact and how that impacts your foot, your feeling in your foot, where your foot makes contact and how that feeling is. You don't need to visualize your foot. Really, the important thing here is what technically could be called the kinesthetic experience of the feeling in your foot, the real, actual felt sense of your foot. If it doesn't even seem to have a shape of your foot, it doesn't matter. And sense your little toe, and then the second toe from the little toe, and the third toe from the little toe, the fourth, and then the big toe. And again, you may have a lot, you may have a little bit of feeling, you may just have a vague sense. It's okay. There's no measure that you're being measured against. You're just turning your attention and seeing what does come up. If nothing comes up, that's okay as well. Right through to the top of your foot and into the ankle. And you may have, as we move through the body, a sense of almost energy or awareness moving, or fluid or electricity or warmth or tingling, moving with your awareness, which moves into your ankle and up your calf and shin at this point, and into the knee area, and then into the upper thigh and hip area, into your buttock. And do the same with your right foot, the little toe and the second toe from the little toe, and the third and the fourth, and then the big toe, into the foot. The foot contact with the sole of the foot has contact, and you're sensing both in the foot and whatever space is around the foot. And again, you might have some sense of a kind of magnetism or electricity or bubbling or vibrating or an energy or a warmth moving up the calf, the shin, through the knee, to the upper thigh and hip, to the buttock area, and then into your pelvic area and the genital area, the stomach in the front, the genital area, and the buttock in the back, into your lower stomach and lower back, and mid-torso, back and front, and mid-back and chest area and the heart area. Your left hand with the left pinky, left ring finger, third finger, fourth, and then thumb, and your palm, on the top side of your hand. The feelings both inside and around the hand, whatever energetic experience you might have, it may or may not be shaped like a hand. What does it feel like in that area? Into your wrist, up your forearm to your upper arm. And similarly with your right hand, your pinky and the ring finger, second, third and fourth finger, and then the thumb, and then the palm and the upper part of the hand into the wrist, and forearm into the elbow and up to the upper arm, And then you feel your shoulders, front of your neck, back of your neck, throat area, lower part of your jaw and the back of your head, moving up through your lips and your mouth and your teeth and your tongue and your gum, and just sensing that whole area, sides of your face into the ears and the back of your skull, cheeks, nose, and eyes, and around to the back of your head, moving your attention to the sides of your eyes, your eyeballs, your eyelids, the sides of your face by your eyes, the ears, the hairline above the ears, towards the back of your head, and moving up the skull all the way to the top of the skull. Whatever sensations you may have at the top of your skull, there might be some kind of tingling or presence. And so that was proceeding part by part with a sense of physical body, body scan. Now just allow yourself to get a full sense of your body, not orienting towards any one spot or another. This is the wide-angle experience of your body. You're not setting your focus in any one place. If you find your focus going to one place, don't fight it, but just see if you can move back, almost as if the sensation equivalent of moving in from a kind of a close-up to a wide angle. So even if you start going into a kind of focus on a particular sensation, see if you can move back and just hold the whole experience of being embodied. So every time you seem to incline to focus in on a particular sensation, don't get into a war, but just see if you can hold that in a large, spacious, felt sense of the whole body. Constantly reminding yourself to have that larger expanse of the whole body in your awareness. And we'll do that for about 5 minutes. If your attention goes to other things, just gently bring it back to your entire body. So the focal point for this particular practice of attention is the whole body, which may or may not feel like it has clear boundaries. We're now going to shift focus a little bit. And so see if you can maintain the orientation of the spaciousness of your mind. But you're going to be looking down, opening your eyes just a little bit, just enough to look down. And you're going to track slowly whatever is predominant in your consciousness, but with an attitude of spaciousness and non-judgmentalness and curiosity, and allowing your experience just to occur and unfold. You're not fighting anything. And you're seeing what's predominant and just very gently labeling it in your mind. If you feel you can do this without labeling, without getting lost in your experience, you could do it without labeling, but the labeling allows us to do this without getting lost. And the point is we're maintaining an attention to the continuity of our experience. Whatever is presenting itself as predominant, in a non-judgmental, accepting way, noticing the impermanence of our experience. And the pace at which to do this will be sight, sound, sound, touch, talk. So the four avenues of experience, the four forms of consciousness we're tracking are the sight consciousness, the sound consciousness, touch, whether it be internal, something occurring, or contact with what you're sitting on. And talk will cover any thoughts that are going around in your head. If you happen to have internal images, those will be sight, but anything that's kind of an internal monologue or dialogue, that's talk. And just very gently and observationally, with a spaciousness and curiosity and acceptance and equanimity, feel these various consciousnesses, let them be, without pushing them away or holding on to them, and just see how they rotate through your experience and what's prominent, and then just keep noting what keeps becoming prominent with your sight, sound, touch, and see if you can really experience these consciousnesses in almost their pure form. And what does it really feel like to see, to hear sound, to touch, and to be aware of your mind? We'll do this for a few minutes. What's the title of Davidson's book? Emotional Life of the Brain. Hmm?
I don't remember.
Okay.
Is it the Buddhist Brain?
No, I think it's the Emotional Life of the Brain. It's probably in the car.
Do you want me to try to look it up? Do you want me to try to look it up?
If you can. So while all of our classes are very important, tonight is a kind of a golden key, which I hope will unlock a lot of what we've been doing for a long time and make some sense of it in both a kind of practical as well as spiritual sense. So it's a tall order. What I'm talking about today is based on Richie Davidson's book, which I think is called, I was looking to see if I had it in my bag, I don't, something like The Emotional Life of the Brain. Anne's doing a Google search as we speak, The Modern World. And it's the section on awareness that I'm really citing. Of course, we deal with awareness and do a lot of awareness practice here. It turns out there are, in a way, two extremes with respect to awareness. And maybe some of you have experienced one side of this extreme or the other. One is kind of hyper-vigilance, which is a kind of awareness that's like that movie about the train that had no throttle on it. Denzel Washington is in it. It's such a good movie. Can't stop the train, and that's what happens in anxiety attacks and panic attacks. Is you can't stop it. And so there's a process of hypervigilance associated with anxiety and panic, and that's a kind of awareness run awry. And the other is a kind of numbing, a kind of sense of anesthesia in the body, a sense of I don't really know what's happening inside of me. And the trouble with that is that it turns out if you don't really have sensations in your body and are not aware of what's going on in your body, it's virtually impossible to make decisions. And I'll say more about that. And I'll tie this into the meditations we did as we go along. So, you're not finding it in?
It's not connecting yet.
It's not connecting?
The emotional life of your brain.
Thank you so much. The emotional life of your brain. Gary?
Davidson.
Richard Davidson.
Sharon Begley.
And Sharon Begley. Thank you. The emotional life of your brain. So there is a part of the brain that's called the insula that is associated with self-awareness. And some people are, the way their insula ties into their amygdala. The amygdala is kind of the emotional register of the brain, and that connects with the prefrontal cortex. That's it for what I'm going to use for the technical terms. But some people will be monitoring themselves, and then their thoughts and feelings start running out of control, and their amygdala gets hyperactivated, and it just becomes a kind of flywheel that's out of control. And that is pretty much how people get into anxiety and panic attacks. So one way of dealing with this hyper-reactivity, this sort of hyper-awareness, this hyper-vigilance, is to actually decrease the brain's reactivity to the signals that are coming from the insula. And So Davidson says you want to alter your relationship to your thoughts, emotions, and bodily sensations so that you do not become entangled in an endless self-reinforcing loop. And I would imagine that at least some people in this room have probably been subject to anxiety and or worry and have found themselves in a position where they sort of couldn't put the brakes on and just sort of like, I'm just so worried, I just can't stop worrying. I wish I could stop worrying, and I can't stop worrying, and I wish I could stop worrying, and I'm so worried. And it is one of these tar baby things that the more you have an uninformed reaction to it, the worse it gets. I wish I could stop worrying. I'm so worried about worrying. And before you know it, you're in a full-bore anxiety or panic attack. So the trick is to somehow break up rumination. And a key, one way of doing this is to reduce the activity of the amygdala and the orbital frontal cortex. And these two parts of the brain, the amygdala is in the sort of the middle of the brain, and I think the orbital frontal cortex has got to be somewhere up here in the front. They form a circuit that assigns emotional values to thoughts and feelings. And if you can break this sort of tight connection between the insula, the amygdala, and the orbital frontal cortex, which is like about to take off, then you can reduce the brain's reactivity. And the brain could start perceiving things less judgmentally, less hysterically, and you won't get hijacked by your internal chatter. And so one golden key is one of the most effective ways to reduce activation of the amygdala and the orbital frontal cortex is through mindfulness meditation. Very simple, very, very key. The mode of mindfulness that I taught you, the third practice, was specifically, it is not out of line with the traditional models that are taught in Asia. In Buddhism, there are 6 consciousnesses. Technically, eye consciousness, sight. Ear consciousness, sound. Body consciousness, touch. Mind consciousness, talk. And we've got 2 more. Nose, smell consciousness, nose consciousness, and tongue consciousness or taste consciousness. 6 consciousnesses. Now, when you really get into it and you study Buddhist philosophy, they basically would say, and it's an interesting thing to start playing around with, that all of our experience can be divided into those 6 simple consciousnesses. You cannot tell me that you've got something that's other than one of those 6. Sight, sound, touch, taste. Sight, sound, touch, taste, smell, and mind consciousness. That's it. Our experiences in 6 consciousnesses. So, yeah, we could throw into the practice smell and taste, but typically, unless we have a lot of strong incense brewing in the room, there's not that much, or people are wearing strong perfumes. We're not noticing smell or taste. But if you happen to be around smell or taste and that's occurring to you as a predominant experience, sure, you could note it as smell or taste. No problemo. So Richie Davidson sort of articulates it this way. You would be stopping from like the mind going, I've got to stop worrying, which creates more anxiety and worry, to how interesting, a thought about stuff at work has entered my mind, which would basically be the observation of thought. There's a thought there. It's just thought. How interesting. You're not identifying with the thought. You're not getting caught up with the thought. You're observing it. You're non-judgmentally aware of it. there is a reason why I'm emphasizing this particular model by Shinzen Young. And what is that reason? There are two reasons. One is you can do it during the day. You don't have to close your eyes. You could have your eyes, in fact, wide open. And you could be doing internally sight, sound, touch, talk. Nobody knows you're doing it. And there you are, you're just practicing mindfulness. The other is, especially if you were to notice that you were very, very reactive, we teach we teach many meditations, if truth is be told. But if you were to start meditating on your breathing, let's say, or even your do, the spot that's 2 or 3 fingers down and 2 or 3 fingers within, if you were finding that you were anxious and you were meditating just internally, depending on how you're wired, you might find that it becomes a runaway. If you were already quite anxious. If you're not anxious, it probably wouldn't occur. If you'd been exposed to a lot of trauma, there might be a little bit of an inclination to go that way. The good thing about using both sight and sound is that you're actually perforating this cycle of the mind, of talk and touch that start going when you get into an anxiety situation where talk and touch get sort of like wound up with one another. And it's like, oh, my heart's beginning to beat fast. Oh my God, I'm about to have an anxiety attack. There goes my heart again. There goes, and it's a nuclear reaction. So by bringing in sight and sound, you are bringing in a break in that cycle. And so there's a kind of inadvertent copaceticness between Buddhist meditation and the needs of people in psychological distress. This practice did not evolve to make people happy. That wasn't the source sort of condition as to what these practices were originated as. They were really trying to understand the nature of reality and understanding them in a way that was liberative. And they still work that way. It just so happens that these same practices have some remarkable mental health benefits. And in terms of doing something during the day, it's very, very nice to have something you can do with your eyes open, and you can just be walking around, and if I'm noticing sight, sound, touch, talk. And we do this, if you do a Theravada mindfulness retreat, you do this in a slightly different language, but you're noticing eye consciousness, you're noticing ear consciousness, hearing, seeing. You might label it a little bit different. But initially, you start labeling all your consciousnesses. So it's the same thing, slightly different labels. Instead of, my leg is killing me, he gives a gloss, a signal from my knee has reached my brain. So the point is, we tend to identify and center ourselves in our experience. And people who are the psychological world, when they start writing about mindfulness, they use some different languages. One language they'll use is that we decenter. We're not centering in our experience. It's very hard to actually describe what we phenomenologically, subjectively do when we meditate. But it's, instead of being at one with our worry, we are aware of our worry. It's sort of easy to say, but it's actually hard for some people to get. In other languages, you're disidentifying with it. For many people, it's like amazing to hear the fact that you had a thought that you should go shopping at Kroger's does not mean you have to go shopping at Kroger's. Most people, it's, I had a thought that I'm a terrible person, therefore I am a terrible person. And it's very liberating to let people know the fact that you have a thought that you're a terrible person is an old tape, probably comes from a parent, and It may not be true. It probably certainly is not true. And you don't have to listen to it. Gulp. Wow. I don't have to listen to that. I've always listened to it. Now, one of the problems is a lot of those tapes are very, very subtle and sort of not easy to catch. You may not even know you have tapes playing. I can't write a book. I'd get up when I was writing my book, I'd get up from my meditation and I'd be starting to go to sit at my computer to write my book. And there'd be a voice in my head which is, you can't write a book. You couldn't possibly write a book. And, by that point, I've done a lot of work on myself. And, the joke is, thanks for sharing. I'm going to sit down here and write my book. But there was, a healthy commentator who wanted to say, you can't, how could you possibly imagine writing a book? And I was writing a book. It's a good book. But part of me didn't think I could write it. It's very interesting. It seems people can actually show benefits, even if you do even 20 minutes of this kind of meditation. There can be really noticeable results, empirical results. And it's very, very helpful if we develop a habit of doing some kind of attentional practice. People might get confused that, one time we teach meditation on the breathing, one time we do the do, then we're talking about sight, sound, touch, and talk. It's the same thing. It's just, it's sort of like recognizing, whether you're developing this muscle. It's not even the muscle. It's the capacity to do exercise. We're developing a capacity to do exercise. And sometimes we exercise this muscle and this muscle. But it's really a capacity of awareness that we sometimes put on our breath, sometimes we put on our do, sometimes we put on our mind, sometimes we put it on our talk, sight, sound, touch. It's the same attentional capacity. But it's great to know that if you start feeling a little bit anxious, it's probably going to be a little bit more useful to do some kind of sight, sound, touch, talk. People who do Ericksonian hypnosis will have people, when they start getting anxious, you'll just say, focus on something outside. What are you hearing? What are you seeing? What are you touching? Or people who work with people with trauma, they start getting into a flashback. Part of what's happening in a flashback is, I said I wasn't going to do this, but I am. The hippocampus, it's another part of the brain, is the timestamp of the brain. Just like on our cameras, there's a timestamp. The hippocampus dates it, March 3rd, 1976. But if you've got your amygdala all juiced up, which is the emotional center of the brain, the amygdala starts poisoning the hippocampus to the point where the hippocampus, the timestamp doesn't work. So something that happened March 3rd, 1970-something in Vietnam, and you're standing outside the door here, you've got no timestamp on your experience. It's happening now in your experience. Literally happening now because it's not timestamped, it's past. So what are people who are working with trauma people saying? Okay, can you see what's going on outside of you? Can you hear what's happening? Can you feel your body? Become present. And so they're bringing time into the equation. They're breaking this kind of flywheel, which is out of time, into present reality. It's very, very powerful, very, very useful. And this is a kind of language that can help us understand it in neurological, neuroscientific terms. So what's the other extreme is, I don't feel anything. We often have people who will say, I don't feel anything. Sometimes I don't feel anything. And people say, well, how can I feel more? So the body scan that we did is really, really useful for supporting feeling emerging. I mean, psychotherapy is a very, very useful process as well when people have trouble with difficulty in feeling, not knowing their feelings. But if you're not in therapy, can't afford it, or you're not interested, you can certainly work with noticing what's going on in our bodies. If you look at all the definitions of feelings, emotions, somewhere in the definition there's going to be something about something occurring in the body. Our emotions register in our bodies. So there's a very, very famous neurologist, Antonio Damasio, and he's written many books at this point, but he has got one, Descartes' Error, which I haven't read, but somebody's citing it in another book I was reading. And he noticed when people had parts of their brain missing where they couldn't register feelings and sensations, they had an impossible time making decisions. I see this in my psychotherapy practice all the time, where there's a combination of obsessionality and non-feelingness in the body. And it's a kind of occupational hazard for some physicians and some engineers, not all. But there's a kind of correlation where people get very, very good with their minds and they're not that good with their bodies. And while they may be good at problem solving in some ways, but they'll come in with I don't know if I should get married or not. And they'll have this long list of the pros and this long list of the minuses. And they're looking at the list and they just can't do anything with it. And you say, what do you feel? And they'll say, I don't know. All the reasons don't register. The image that came up to me was, imagine standing in a buffet. You've got all this fruit in front of you and you can't smell. And somebody says, choose what you're going to eat. And you basically say, I don't know. I can see that one's got greens in it. I know greens have a good, they're good for my whatever. And that one's got protein. I know protein is good. But somehow nothing's moving me. No, because you can't smell. Feelings are the aroma of our thoughts, essentially. And unless you've got aroma to your thoughts, you can't make a decision. And so if you're having trouble in general in life making decisions, you might look at yourself and say, do I actually have feelings? Now, there may be other reasons why you're having trouble making decisions, but if you're not particularly tied into your body, it would be very worthwhile to do something like the slow body scan. There are a lot of Buddhist reasons to do these meditations as well, and I'm going to name a few. First, they are attentional practices, and really attention is our path. From beginning to end, what we're doing is working with attention. Some people think, well, I'm not going to be attentive to my emotions, or I'm not going to be attentive to my body, I'm just going to be attentive to space. Space is cool. I'm going to space out. Some people want to sidestep emotions and body and everything and just go straight into relaxed space. And maybe for some that can work, but typically long term it doesn't. It really is through being thoroughly acquainted with the nature of the granular nature of our reality that we can really break through to the spacious reality which coexists with the granular reality that we are. And that may not make any sense initially, but that is the process. It's not all that yucky stuff is here, and then I've got all this yummy, great, spacious stuff over here. And especially in Mahayana Buddhism and in Vajrayana, we talk about non-dual realization. And that just means that the details are the stuff of what leads to realization, and that is through mindfulness and discrimination. If we can decrease our reactivity by doing something like the mindfulness that I taught, or any mindfulness practice is going to help decrease reactivity, you're basically decreasing the strength of your karmic traces. Decreasing strength of karmic traces is diminishing the multitudinous rebirths that, we can be avoiding planting seeds for. It's important in Buddhist practice to become aware of the consciousnesses. It's very, very significant in terms of deeper practice to be very, very familiar with sight, sound, touch, talk, smell, taste, and mind consciousness. I mean, if you can't sort that out, you really can't do, ultimately, very, very high practice. There is a way in which this kind of practice, over time, first of all, makes us very, very familiar with the impermanence of our experience. I mean, impermanence is a gateway to the most profound realizations. And we all tend to believe in permanence, not only as a kind of sandwich board that we wear, but we all hold to permanence in very, very subtle ways, and we hold to substantiality in very, very subtle ways. What's the final exam on that? Just look at how shocked you are when a loved one dies, a friend dies, a public figure dies, a pet dies, or some part of your body goes rotten. I thought I would last forever. I thought they would last forever. What, this 37-year-old country singer, died. I mean, she's much younger than it, and most everybody in this room. Not everybody, but most of us. She's a young thing. She offed herself. It's shocking. It's because we hold to substantiality at a kind of core level, and we hold to permanence in a subtle level, that this is shocking. If we really got it, it wouldn't be that surprising. It's just the way it is. So noticing how consciousness is really kaleidoscopically and cinematically moving just from one thing to another, from one thing to another, if your mind can get very, very sharp with that, it can lead to some very, very deep and profound understandings of impermanence. And with impermanence, very naturally comes a sense of it's not exactly satisfactory because it won't last. And with both of those, ultimately, it's quite easy then to finally come to understand it's not really very substantial. It's not really the self I thought I had. It occurs naturally. And so in terms of the lineages that we hold, and the deep lineages of Mahayana and Vajrayana and ultimately Dzogchen, I mean, anything that can contribute to our lessening of a holding to a substantial sense of self, to a permanent self, definitely opens the way for understanding our true nature. It's a total entree into a deeper, closer, more resonant harmonization with an understanding what our true nature is. It comes gradually, it comes in stages, but it's really using our everyday experience of what are we feeling and what is the nature of that, and being aware of it in just a very non-judgmental, curious, open manner. One of the big synonyms in Dzogchen for reality is Nyamnyi Chenmo. It just means the great evenness, the great sameness. It's the ability to really hold in mind our experience without getting ruffled. And that's a slow train. It's a slow training. But it is possible, it does occur. It very much occurs. And the real news is that reality is already there. It's part of our heritage. What our practice is doing is just sort of harmonizing us to the point where we can get in touch with what is already our natural heritage that we're not going to have to do any work to establish once we become familiar with it. But it does take some familiarization, and these practices are great familiarization tools for doing that. I will take questions and comments.
I can understand when you talk of our impermanence, and we realize, or we know that things are not permanent. For example, death, and that's all fine.
Sort
I know
of.
that. No, it is fine.
Yeah.
But it's the way that the end comes for some people that causes, for example, cause me pain in seeing someone I love, or if I develop a fatal illness, and if I have to go through some painful treatments or whatever.
Right.
It's the way. Not so much that, yes, I understand it's impermanent, and I may not be here, and and the tape goes on. So I guess my question to you is, how can we manage that? The way.
Right. So there are two aspects to the way. There's the physical way and the emotional or mental way. The fact that we will experience physical pain is probably, in some ways, unavoidable. We don't know how that will be, and it might be very gruesome. What we are hoping for in being practitioners is that our emotional and mental capacity to endure such physical pain will not lead to the emotional carnage that many people experience when experiencing pain. And there are a lot of levels to what gets stirred up emotionally when our bodies start going either slowly or rapidly. Some people feel that they have perfect bodies and should have perfect bodies. And when even the first signs of aging start appearing, they start going a little bit crazy. Welcome to the plastic surgery industry. I mean, writ large. I'm not talking about a little bit of a nip and a tuck here and there. I'm talking about, every 3 months I've got to go in and get repaired. And, some people, any sign of aging is actually really psychologically almost crippling, either in themselves or in their loved ones. That's just the beginning. I mean, then, some part of our body might go, and what if you have, some part of your sexual orientation, sexual identity, whether it be through prostate cancer or breast cancer or ovarian cancer. These are very, very tender little pieces of ourselves and big pieces of ourselves. They start going. People have a lot of feelings about those. Or, you can't, you lose a leg, or you can't walk. I mean, you lose mobility, you get paralyzed. I mean, these are all emotionally very, very significant. But it's there, and how you emotionally deal with these things that are, in fact, very, very big. That's where we hope in practice to make some inroads. The fact that they occur, anybody, including a very, very advanced practitioner, might end up in an ICU with 20 tubes going in and out. But how they then die, we've been around some of our teachers in, pretty dire physical condition. And there's a certain grace under fire that, is notable. And that's our aspiration. If that's not where you're at, then it's not where you're at. I mean, we just need to be who we are. If we are panicking because something wrong with our bodies, that's where we're at the moment. We may not be capable of that. But we are practicing in our younger days with the hope that in our older days we have some skill. That's why it's a continuous deal with practice, and over decades we do see some changes, and it's why we offer that to others. We think there can be some significant changes. We see those. It's a good question. Anybody else? Ginger?
This isn't a question so much as just a comment about how helpful I found your linking the neurology to the kind of meditation that would be helpful for somebody who's going into panic versus the person who really can't feel their body or who's numbing out.
Yeah.
And that there are times when I forget that I can change the style of meditation, even though I've done meditation for many, many years. And it just reminds me of, in different points of my life, that particular forms of meditation are really skillful to apply in that given moment. So I found your talk very, very helpful.
Yeah, thank you. And it's actually, the observation is very, very important. So, I mentioned 3 or 4 different meditations tonight in terms of the breathing, the do that we've taught here, doing the different sense consciousnesses, the Shinzen Yang style of mindfulness, or really the body scan. We need to know what we might need at certain times. At certain times we might need something that really is more settling. At certain times we might need something that's more sort of energizing. And there are so many different kinds of Buddhist meditation. Some really address one thing or the other. And if we're around a teacher, it's great to talk with the teacher what will be helpful. But if we're not, we need to take a little responsibility and know what's in our medicine cabinet and which medicines to use. Tiffany?
So in my life, I have a history of having panic attacks.
Okay.
And to my knowledge, like one of the earliest ones was when I was a child, and it was thinking about death.
Yeah.
Just the realization that I was going to die.
Yeah.
And even now, just, thinking about it makes my hands are clammy, my heart is racing.
Right.
And so, of course, naturally, I tend to avoid thinking about it. And
right.
In the past few months, meditating on impermanence and everything, I tend to wake up in the middle of the night and stay awake for hours thinking about catastrophic events, my own impermanence, my family's, I don't know, should I back off or,
Yes, so this is a good thing to talk about with us privately. It's very important to talk about that. And if you're noticing that occurring, it would probably be good to back off. And B, as you're noticing you're anxious, I would do this particular kind of meditation. But you don't need to, we'll talk privately, but you don't need to be doing more of that impermanence right now. And our prayers are really a wish for wishing well to everyone, and then in particular for our teachers. So we start on page 22. By this good may I swiftly once become a great guru. Lead all beings, everyone,
to reach to that very ground.
And a long life prayer for His Holiness the Dalai Lama on page 25. In a pure land ringed by snow mountains, source of bliss and benefit for all, powerful Denzin Gyatso Chenrezi, lotus feet please stay hundreds of years. Fill vast space with your activities. Prayer for Adzom Pela Rinpoche. Om Swasti. Flawless refuge sources give blessings. Teacher, protector, kind Dharma Lord. Jorme Tupten Gyatso wondrous good. Lotus feet ever, deeds everywhere. We start with Namo Guru on page 26 and then go to the first prayer on the top of page 27. Namo Guru, glorious, wise, K, bright, tune, and kind song. Now that your work here has subsided, please think of our pain, sad suffering. We pray you quickly take form again. Anna and Harvey, like the waxing moon, may your life and merit flourish, grow. Through the threefold skillful pundit's deeds, live long benefiting all you meet. By the true power of two Vajra truths, 3 jewels, 3 roots, Buddha's compassion, faithful Sangha and aspiration, may this prayer be realized at once. And the prayer for Dawn Mountain on page 32. May there be a great fine new temple, great seat for all high practice learning, which having spread in all directions, male and female yogis everywhere, practice and further the teachings there. So is the blessing now rhyming there?
Aspiration. Yes, it rhymes. We start with that.
Yeah. So we'll start with the aspiration, and we'll do also the for as long as space abides. May all beings always have happiness and its causes. May all beings always be free of pain and its causes. For as long as space abides, as long as the world remains, just so long may I be there, resolving all beings' pain. And Kwang, if you would go light the candle. Just the central one would be okay. So we do the blessing. With all of you in mind, we light this lamp of clarity. May the glow of love, wisdom shine within us, everyone, till we rise forth born in enlightened mandala. Back to the drawing board again. She is the great rhymer in the family.
Sometimes I miss her. Okay.
So we will be reading the book now. Sweet.
So our prayers that just went out for everyone, everywhere, and specifically tonight for the well-being in every possible way of Chip Lacey, LaHonda Henderson, Josh Henderson, Stephen Henderson, Don Urwitz, Paul Rowe in the Bardo, John Boland, Cynthia, Francis and Albert, Nancy Hesh-Martin, Celia V. in the Bardo, Nora, Benny, Hadley family, Lizzie, Larry Hall, Craig Hall, Lewis, Gregory, or Larry Barnett, Aram Shah, Michael, Betty, Mark, Rosalie, Ken, Glenn, Heather, Seema, Alana, John, Rita, Shaw, Kendall, Jenny, Theodore, Julie, Harvey, Tom, Miranda, Thomas's friend, Marika, Thea in the Bardo, Sophia, Evan, Christy, Mary P., Maria, Christina, Dennis, Martin, Larry, Henriette, Camille, Tom, Peter, Guillermo, Zachary, Ginny, Hope, Julia, Mary, Gail, Ken, Clara, Marco, Esteban, Lois, Marvin Henderson in the Bardo, Bonnie Henderson, Cheryl Henderson, Kelly Sholafor, Elizabeth, Jackie, Charles Carlo, Jeanette and families, Tilton Jackson, Lisa Maison, Patricio, Bert Long in the Bardo, Peggy in the Bardo, Matt, illness, Jerry, Joan Batson, Mary Aquarius, Elan, Jancy, Ramya and Kevin, Bobby, Jeanette, all ill children, Ruby Wong and family, Harry Hutton, Joanne Hutton, Kate Hutton, Lois Silverstein, Mary Smith Bell's mother, Lavon Schultz in the Bardo, Nam Vo, Concepcione Nore Dunn, Dan Perdue, Dan Kozort, Valerie Stevens and Guy, Sidney Pyburn, Anshul Varma and family.
So we'll conclude with an ah, which is sending our well-wishing to everyone in this community, everyone in the greater Houston community, and all beings throughout space. Thank you all for coming. We have continuing celebration of New Year's. We're starting on, is it Wednesday, dear?
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow? Wednesday.
Tomorrow and Thursday. For people who want to, people have been practicing for a while and want to do a green tar practice. We're starting that tomorrow. And we're having a...
That's at 6:30 on Wednesday and 6:30 on Thursday.
Okay, and we're having a retreat welcoming newcomers on Saturday, March 21st, whatever that Saturday is, from 10 to 12, 22nd. 23rd. Okay.
From 10 to 12. About Tara practice. Tara Dupcha.
Yeah. If people come tomorrow and Thursday, they'll hear about the
Okay. And we are switching gears a little bit, but actually taking off from what we talked about tonight. The next 5 lectures Anne will be doing, and it's going to be about how we respond to things in life, sometimes in not the most optimal manner, and how we can use our mindfulness and our spacious awareness to, in a way, work with those patterns of reactivity that we all get snared in. So we'd very, very much encourage you, if you're interested, to come to the first and third Tuesdays, which will be starting, I guess, in March. So happy you all came. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you.